So you're wanting to make a new custom government for Crusader Kings III version 1.18 and beyond. Today I'll be telling you about all the different rules and things you can add to a government, and also how to apply different governments to new or already existing characters in the game. So first things first, once you're in the Crusader Kings launcher, what we want to do is find a empty playset like this, and then go to Mod Library and Upload Mod, and then click on Create a Mod, and then this we're going to call it Test Government. And then the version being 0.1, and then the directory being the same as the name above, just to make it easy. I'm going to put random tags in, so in this case I'm just going to put 1.18, and then the playsets, go back to the empty playset and add to the current playset. So what you've got now is once you click on these three dots, you've got show in folder, and then inside of here we've got a descriptor.mod, so that is the mod files at the moment. What we want to do is create some new folders for that. So the first one we want to create is common, and then the next one we want to have is localization. And then inside of common, what we want to do is create some new folders. The first one will be defines, and then the second one will be flavorization, and then the third one will be governments, and then the fourth one will be on_action. And then going back outside and then going inside of the localization folder, we're going to create a new folder in here and call it English. And then inside of that one, we want to create a new folder, a new file rather, and then call it test_government_L_English, and then remove the .txt, change it to a .yml, and then click yes on that. And now what we want to do is open up the .yml in Visual Studio Code. Okay, so once we're in Visual Studio Code, we want to go into the governments folder here and create a new txt. So in this case, we're going to be calling it test_government_types.txt. And then inside of that, what we want to do immediately is go down to the bottom right here, change UTF-8 to save with encoding UTF-8 with bomb. Then we want to start typing out our government. So in this case, we're going to be calling it test_government equals curly brackets, and then we're going to put the government_rules at the top. One thing I want to say as well is that each of the governments within the base game are not very large. So I'll put an image of one of the governments, so the feudal government, for example, on the screen now. This is not much code, but I will be putting a bunch of code into our test government just to show you the different options as to what you can do. So the first thing we want to do is do some basic rules here. So we want to do create_cadet_branches. So this is whether or not you can create cadet branches within the government. And then we've got, after that, we've got religious equals no. And then we'll put in another option in here, court_generate_spouses. So this is going to be spawning custom characters in that could be appropriate. And then we've also got the council, so whether or not your government has a council in the first place. And then a rulers_should_have_dynasty equals yes. And then a regiments_prestige_as_gold equals, for example, you could do no. So whether or not the regiments cost prestige. So in this case, it will be no. And then the dynasty_named_realms equals yes. And then below this block, we're going to go with legitimacy equals yes. So what that'll do is whether or not you can have legitimacy if it's valid. And then we'll go with administrative equals no for our government. So it's whether or not your government is administrative. So for example, the Byzantine Empire is administrative. And then below that, we're going to have admin_allows_holding_multiple_primary_tier_titles equals no. So this requires administrative to be yes. If you do put it as yes. So what it does is it allows administrative rules to hold multiple primary tier titles. It's only checked when you transfer certain title types. So appointment, succession, and step down. And then the next one we want to do is landless_playable. We'll put that as no. Actually, no, we'll put it as yes. But so what that does, allows rulers to be playable even when they don't have any county. So this one actually requires a DLC flag. So if you have the DLC, then you can actually use this. And then below that, we're going to have allow underscore out underscore of underscore realm underscore inheritance equals no. So whether or not your realm can be inherited outside of what you currently own. So you might lose land if it's a yes. This one, for example, is a default of no. And then under that, we're going to have use underscore as underscore base underscore on underscore landed. So this is a switch to the government. So when you obtain your first title, if the old holder was, for example, this test government, then you will switch to that this government when you become landed. And below that, we're going to have use underscore as underscore base underscore on underscore rank underscore up equals yes. So what that'll do is, I believe it is when you get a higher title tier. So from kingdom to empire, it uses this government type when you do that. And then below that, we're going to have conditional underscore MAA underscore refill. So this is applying a conditional. So you would have to have a rule whether or not your men at arms can refill or replenish. I don't recommend setting this to yes, as it is quite performance heavy. Only very few government types or people should have this. And then below that, we're going to have mercenary equals no. So this is whether or not unlanded rulers with this government type can offer themselves up as mercenaries. The government type mercenary is not actually using the mercenary equals yes, it's using a different setup. And then below that, so the first one we're going to do is state underscore faith equals no, which does default to no. And then below that, we're going to have treasury equals no. So this is making it so that you have a treasury or not. There is another rule later on that it will say that is to do with treasury as well, but it requires treasury equals yes. This is mainly used in China, for example. And then below that, we're going to have merit equals no. So this is whether or not you're a meritocracy or require merit. And then there's the barter equals no. So this is whether or not you can use bartering goods as your government. And then buildings equals yes. It is a default to yes, and it's whether or not your government can build buildings in the first place. And then there's a radiance equals default to no. The characters have access to the radiance mechanics. And then whether or not your government uses county fertility. So users underscore county underscore fertility equals no. So this would be for nomad herder type governments. And then the replenishers underscore county underscore fertility. So this is in conjunction with this one above it. So again, for nomads and herders. And then obedience equals no. So whether or not you use or want to use the obedience system. And then users underscore culture underscore and underscore house underscore head underscore named underscore realms equals no. So this is a naming of the realms itself using the cultures and house heads. And then sticky underscore government. So this is an option that doesn't have a lot of documentation. I'm not entirely sure what it does, but it is on the administrative government. So I don't want to give an assumption for this because I might get it wrong. And there's subject underscore men underscore at underscore arms equals no, which is a default. So the subject men at arms is for steppe and nomad / herder governments. It's whether or not you can actually hire regiments or men at arms in the first place. And if you have this as yes, then it will come up with tooltips saying that you can't hire them. And then below this, we're going to have use underscore title underscore tier underscore modifiers equals yes. So what this is default to yes. It's whether or not you gain passive prestige from held titles and or title tier modifiers. And then below that, we're going to have inherit underscore from underscore dynastic underscore government equals no. So whether or not you're a dynastic government and whether or not can inherit from other governments of the same type. One thing to note as well is that the dynastic governments, many characters in the game are dynastic. So that would be, for example, feudal. It does follow a dynastic system. And then below that, we're going to have deny underscore powerful underscore vassal. And we'll put it as a no. So if it's a yes, then this government can never have powerful vassals. And then use underscore men at arms underscore maintenance. Underneath that, we're going to have equals yes. I didn't spell that correctly. Maintenance. And then if it's a no, then you will never have to pay for men alarms, well, their men alarms maintenance rather. And then below that, we're going to have no underscore capital underscore movement underscore cooldown equals no. So this is whether or not you have a cooldown when moving your capital. If it's a yes, then you have nothing, no cooldown. And then below that, we're going to have redirects underscore, that's not how you spell that. Redirects wars underscore 2 underscore overlord equals no. So this is another new rule that's only used in the herder government. I believe it defaults to no, as it's not actually in any other governments, but it says in the herder one that is equals to yes. And then below that, we're going to have noble underscore families equals no. The default is no. And then house underscore aspirations equals no. Whether or not your house, your government uses house aspirations or yes, which is family attributes. And then the replace underscore gold underscore cost underscore buy underscore treasury. So this requires the treasury up here to be a yes. And if it's a yes, then it replaces the state expenses with treasury instead of gold. And then below that, we're going to have block underscore alliance underscore child underscore marriage equals no. So it is a default to no, but if it's a yes, then it disables any alliances being created when children are married. And then we're going to have another block alliance underscore non underscore dominant underscore gender underscore child underscore marriage equals no. So this is if you have a non-dominant child that you're trying to marry off. So for example, if you have a male preferred nation, then if you marry off a female child, then it won't create any alliances if it's a yes. And then below that, we're going to have always underscore use underscore patronym equals no. The default is no, but it's whether or not it will show fathers, sons, or family names such as Wilson instead of son of William. Clan government uses this. And then below that, we're going to have affected underscore by underscore development equals yes. And then that's whether or not your counties are affected by development. And then below that, we're going to have considers underscore piety for underscore title underscore creation equals no, whether or not the game considers a character's piety for a title creation. The default is no for that as well. And then ask underscore for underscore tribute. So this is whether or not you can ask for tribute. I'm going to put it as no. It is defaulted to no. Whether or not you can ask someone to become your tributary. And then count underscore tributaries underscore for underscore title underscore requirements equals no. So this is whether or not you're counting your tributaries. So if you have a foreign nation that is a tributary to you, it will not count towards your title requirements, such as creating a kingdom or empire. And then disable underscore regnal underscore numbers equals no. So this is default to no as well. I believe it's for creating a, for example, a William II or William III and so on. And then, so outside of the government rules, we're going to do royal underscore court. So this is the DLC. We're going to have it as any. So whether or not you have the DLC, it doesn't matter. You could put it as yes or no as well. And then we're going to put in a fallback. So fallback, in our case, we're going to have it as a 1. But the lower the number, the higher the priority is. So what it does is it will select this government if there is no other government or there's an invalid government type. So for example, if for whatever reason feudal is invalid, then it'll fall back on test government. Now we're going to go above fallback. We're just going to do a mechanic underscore type equals, and then in this case, we're probably the closest to feudal. So what this means is we are making our test government a part of the feudal government family. So this government actually belongs to the feudal government, is probably a child of it. And below that, you could do is underscore mechanic underscore type underscore default equals, and then we're going to go with no. This isn't actually needed. It isn't needed to be declared. But if you have a bunch of governments or custom governments and you want to have one be an offspring of another government, then this is the way to do it. In this case, I'm just going to comment these out. And below the fallback, we're going to continue now with can underscore get underscore government equals curly brackets. And then inside of here, this is essentially a trigger with the character scope. So things that relate to the character can be used here. If it's failed, then you can't actually get the government. In this case, I'm going to go with not equals curly brackets and then culture equals and has underscore cultural underscore pillar equals, and then we're going to have it as ethos underscore spiritual. So what this means essentially is as long as you don't have the spiritual ethos, you can get the government. And then below the can get government, we're going to put in a primary underscore holding equals, and then we're going to have it as castle underscore holding, and then a valid underscore holding as well. So what it is, what you're able to hold. We're going to have castle holding, and we're going to have a tribal holding. So you can hold both feudal and tribal holdings, and also a city holding. I have actually misspelt here, so it's actually holdings. This castle holding, tribal holding, and city holding, this is kind of unseen in base game. It's normally either just castle city or just tribal or just castle. And then you can do a required county underscore holdings equals curly brackets, and then you can actually put any sort of holding in here. I'm going to put tribal holding, so this is a requirement for it. This doesn't quite make sense in terms of like you've got your primary holding castle valid, also being castle city and tribal. It doesn't quite make sense to have a tribal holding in here as a required, as it's only really used, just this one is only used by the tribal and the one or government. You could actually change this to castle, which I will do. And then the next thing you could do is actually go and do a generated underscore character underscore templates. Oh, misspelled there, templates equals, and then you could do, for example, herder underscore character. So what this will do is it'll actually spawn in custom designed characters. I will probably make a tutorial on how to do this shortly or soon, so you can comment that out. It's specific characters, so of different skill types or different traits. And then you can also as well do primary underscore heritages, and it equals curly brackets, and you can have a certain heritage you want to have this government more so. The clan government has a primary heritage in this. I'm going to leave this commented out. And then a preferred underscore religion, or religions rather, and then equals curly brackets. You can do the same for this. So if you want a specific religion to be favored with this government, or you can have that in there, and then those people will prefer to have this government. And outside of that, you can also do court underscore generate underscore commanders. This is a number-based thing. So in my case, I'm going to have 3. The court generate commanders, the Holy Order and mercenary governments are the only ones that actually have a number specified. The other one is a no, and that's the landless adventurer government. So that is just a simple no, whether or not they do. I'm going to put it as 3 just for the example. And then a supply underscore limit underscore mult, so multiplier underscore 4 underscore others equals, and then you can have it as a range of -1 to +1, or -100% to 100%. I'm going to put it as a 0, and then below that we're going to have prestige underscore opinion underscore override. So this is an opinion number system. It defaults to a range of numbers in a row. So the default value is 0, 10, -10, 0, 5, 10, 20, 30. And these are based on your prestige levels. So this would be the lowest prestige level, that's the highest. For this example, I'm going to show you some different numbers. So -5 to 8, and we'll put this as a 15, and then a 25 and a 35. And then below that, we're going to have a vassal underscore contract underscore group. And then we'll have a feudal underscore vassal. So this is a feudal vassal system. You could have each government, well, not every government, but most governments have their own vassal group. It might be easier for you to just copy paste or just use a feudal one or a tribal one. I might make a tutorial in the future on how to make your own, if it's possible. And then below that, you can do house underscore unity equals, and then, for example, you could do clan underscore house underscore unity. This isn't needed. It defaults to not having one, but the clan is the only one that does. So I'm going to comment this one out. And then below that, if you do have the clan house unity, you can do tax underscore slot underscore type equals, and then you could do clan underscore tax underscore slot. That I will comment out as well, but that is something you can do. And then below that, if you have a government that likes to have a domicile or you want to create one, you can, I believe, do domicile underscore type equals a state. I'm not sure. This is a little bit finicky, this system. I'm going to comment it out for my government type, but that is something I might make a tutorial on as well in the future. And then below that, we're going to go with AI. So this is what the AI can do with this government type, or its functionality within it. There are a few different things that you can use. For example, the one I will be using today is use underscore legends equals yes. But you could, for example, use underscore lifestyle equals, in this case, no. So whether or not you can use a lifestyle, and then arrange underscore marriage equals no. So this one here is used by the herder government. This one is used by the republic, theocratic, and mercenary and herder governments. And then the use underscore goals equals no. So this is also used by republic, theocratic, mercenary, herder, and landless governments. And then the use underscore decisions equals no, and that's only available. That's only being used by the herder government. And then use underscore scripted underscore GUIs equals no, which is used by the republic, theocratic, mercenary, herder, and landless governments. And then perform underscore religious underscore reformation equals no, and that's used again by the republic, theocratic, mercenary, herder, and landless governments. I'm going to comment out all of these, as I will not be using these ones today, but if you're wanting to make a government that is similar to those, then go ahead. And then below that, we're going to have character underscore modifier. So what your character gains from being within this government. We're going to start it off with a knight underscore limit equals 5, and then a levy underscore size equals minus 0.45, and then a minute at arms underscore cap equals 2, and then a min at arms underscore limit equals minus 2. So this, you can fiddle around with the numbers or create or have new variables in there. These are some variables that I've simply just taken from different governments that are already in the game. A few of these will be from administrative or feudal or tribal. And then below that, we're going to have vassal underscore limit. Administrative uses 100. We're going to use 50 for this one. And then going into some more modifiers, we've got feudal underscore government underscore tax underscore contribution underscore malt. I didn't spell tax. Equals minus 0.5. And then we can copy paste this one here and then put in a levy contribution multiplier equals minus 0.5. So this is copying from the administrative government. You can also, continuing with what the administrative government has, we've got clan government underscore tax underscore contribution underscore malt equals minus 0.5. We'll copy that and then paste that below and change the tax to levy. So that is our character modifiers done. We're going to go below that and we'll put in a color for our government. So in my case, I'm wanting to go for more of a lighter blue, sort of like a teal. So we'll go with 50, 150, and 150. And then we'll put in some flags. So this is for modability. So a bunch of the base game governments have flags in them. So for example, flag equals government is feudal. That is a flag that the feudal government has. And so it allows you to mod and say, if your government has a certain flag, then do this. In my case, I'm going to have it government as test, and then flag equals government can underscore raid underscore rule. So whether or not your government can raid. Not all governments have this flag. It's mostly the tribal, or I believe maybe clan has it too, but not sure on that. Flag equals may underscore elevate underscore co underscore monarch is the next one that I'll be using. And then flag equals government is settled. All right, so that is the government or test government complete. It is a very large file. You do not have to list out a lot of these. For example, this block here doesn't have to be added as they're already at their default values, but moving on, we're going to add a new file into the defines folder. So we're going to be calling that test_defines.txt. And then I'm going to be copying over a base game defines. So in this case, we're going to be using the common/defines, and then inside of 00_defines.txt, we're going to be using this one here. So the n government, and then we're just going to be adding in our government in here. So test_government. And then one thing I will add is I believe making your own defines and adding your own government types, I don't believe if you make your own one, it will append to this. I think you have to copy paste from the base game, but I could be wrong. And so that is this file done as well. So we're going to make a new file inside of Flavorization. I'm going to create a new one here called test_title_holders.txt. Oh, actually, before we move on, I'm going to change this to save with encoding UTF-8 with bomb, and then do the same on this file as well. And we're going to start creating some flavorization text, essentially. So what the first one we're going to do is baron_test_feudal_male equals, and in curly brackets, we're going to have type equals character, and then gender equals male, and then special equals holder, tier equals barony, and then priority equals 5, governments equals test_government. So a lot of these will be copy pasting the values or slightly changing them up to gender equals female, for example. For example, I'm going to copy paste this one here, put it below it, and then change these males to female. And that is the female version of it. And then you got to add in another one in there. So copy paste that one, and then remove the gender out of it. Remove the gender, and then also remove the special. So this is the name for a baron inside of the test government. And then we have to essentially just do the same thing for counties, for duchies, kingdoms, and empires. So for this one, we're going to, for the county, we're going to go with count_test_feudal_male equals curly brackets, and then copy these over here, and then change the priority number to 16 for county. And then we're going to copy paste this one as well, and then change the baron to count. We also want to change the tiers within these to county, and then tier equals county as well, and then change this tier to 16. And then we also need to add in the base for the county one. So I'm going to add that in there, change this to barony, to county rather, and then the tier to county as well, and change the priority to 16. And then I'm going to copy paste all three of these, put that below it, and then we need to change the count to Duke, and then Duke again, and we're going to change the tier to Duchy, and change the priority as well to, in this case, 26. So we're going to change those over, and then I'm just going to copy paste Duchy over to County, and then we have to do the same thing for Kingdom. So we're going to change this to King, and then the priority number as well to 46, and then the tier to Kingdom. Copy paste that, put that in the duchies, and then swap these out to King, and make sure it's 46. And then below that, we're going to copy paste again to get the Empire. So we're going to put Emperor, and then I'm just going to copy that and paste that in here. I accidentally copy pasted the last one, so change that back to King. And then those three are Emperor now. Then we want to change the priority number to 101. And then the title or tier to Empire. And I'll copy that, paste those in there. All right. Now this file done. What we want to do now is create an on action to make it so that we can tell the game to change which government for which character. So if we go into the on action file in here and then call that test_game_start.txt, and change that from UTF-8, save with encoding, UTF-8 with bomb. And then we're going to be appending the on underscore game underscore start equals curly brackets, and then on underscore actions. And then we're going to create our own on actions. We will do a couple of them. At first, we're going to do the test underscore on underscore game underscore start underscore government underscore change, and then not have anything after that. We're just going to copy paste this down below it, and then add some curly brackets into it, and then we're going to add an effect. We're going to put in a rule here. So every underscore ruler, and then if limit, and then let's say the current underscore date is less than 870.1.1. So we want the start date of 867 to have the test government involved. This isn't a great way of doing it. So I would prefer to do a different from current date, but it's just for showing the example. Below that, we're going to have an or statement. So if your culture, for example, has cultural pillar, and we're going to go heritage Frankish. So if your character has the Frankish heritage, then it will change government to test government. Or if the has culture equals underscore culture colon Prussian. So for this example, we're going to have everyone who's Frankish heritage and Prussian culture. We're going to have it so that they change underscore government to test government. So what you can actually do as well is you can actually limit who out of these gets changed. So for example, we could go not equals curly brackets and then government has flag. So that's the flags that we added at the end of our governments types. We're going to have government underscore is underscore theocracy. So anyone who has the theocracy government cannot be changed to test government. And you could actually do this as well for individual characters. So in this example, the heritage Frankish will also involve the King Lothair II. So if we do this is not equal to character, and then in this example, Lothair II is 144998. If we do that, then he will not change to test government, but anyone who has the Frankish heritage below him will. What you can do as well, outside of the every ruler, you can actually change him to a different government. So character colon 144998 equals curly brackets, and then you could do change government to, we're just going to do something a little bit funky, we're going to change them to tribal government, just to show the example and how you can actually do these for yourself. Then below this, we're going to actually add another on action. So we'll have some different variables or different if limits as to what can make a character change government. So we're going to add another one in here. So we're going to go test underscore on underscore game underscore start underscore government underscore tradition change. So we're going to have a character change government based on what traditions he has. So we're going to copy paste that below this on action. We're going to go effect, and then again, every ruler. Probably not the most efficient way of doing it with the every ruler, but in this example, it works. You go if underscore limit equals curly brackets, and then culture equals curly brackets. Then we'll go with has underscore cultural pillar tradition underscore holders. So we'll make all the Dutch people change government. And then we'll put underneath the culture, we're going to make sure again that they are not theocracy. So government has flag, government is theocracy. And then underneath the limit, because at the moment it's not doing anything, we have to change the government to test. So that is this file done. This one doesn't have a current date in it at the bottom here, so this will change no matter what. So if you start in 1066, it will change the Dutch people to test government as well. I just realized as well, I had as cultural pillar, not as cultural tradition. Move that equal sign there. Now we're done with the on actions here. We want to go and start with our localization. So the first thing we want to do here is in the localization English test underscore government underscore L underscore English is L underscore English colon. And then below that, we're going to go with test underscore government colon 0, and then a quotations test underscore government. This is the name of our government. And then we're going to go below that, we're going to go test government underscore DSC, so a description of it. And then we're going to go with a \n just to lower it one line, and then test, or capital T, test government description. And then we're going to go with test government underscore with underscore icon :0, and then a @government underscore type underscore feudal exclamation mark. Then we're going to go with $test underscore government $. So what this will do is that it will have an icon, the feudal icon, and then use the first line here. The $sign is essentially just quotations saying use this one instead. So this will be a feudal symbol or icon with test government afterwards. And then test underscore government underscore adjective :0, and then we'll call it test. So that is what it will be called. So in base game, for feudal, for example, it will be called feudal, and then tribal, clan, all that sort of stuff. That's how it will be displayed. That is the end of this file. We do want to change this to UTF-8 with bomb as well, so save with encoding. And so after that, we want to create a new folder within localization and English. So new folder in here, and then we're going to be calling it culture. And then inside of culture, we want to create a new file, and we're going to call it test underscore culture underscore titles underscore L underscore English.yml. Inside of that, we want to make sure it's got UTF-8 with bomb, which it does, and L underscore English : and then below that, we're going to go with the title names that we made before. So that's in this file. And I will be calling them all after the feudal titles, so baron, baroness, or count, county, stuff like that. You don't actually have to, you could make your own names up. This is why I did the title holders in here, so that you could know how to do your own names. But in this case, I'm just going to be using the normal feudal names. So underscore male :0, in quotations, we're going to have as baron. We're going to just copy these first three words here and then paste that below, and then do underscore female :0, and then baroness. And then below that, we're just going to have the baroness feudal, and then we're going to have it be called barony. So that's the actual location itself. And then count underscore test underscore feudal underscore male. We're going to go back and then copy the first three words: :0, and it's going to be called a count. And then below that, we're going to go underscore female after that and go countess, and then the county. Future me in here, we just want to add in the Duke title. So Duke underscore test underscore feudal underscore male :0, and then change that to Duke, and then copy the first three words, paste that below there, add an underscore female :0, and then add in Duchess, and then the first three words again, :0, and then we're just going to put a duchy. Below that, we now want to go on to king underscore test underscore feudal underscore male :0, quotations, so king. And then we want to go back to the first three words, copy those, go down one, underscore female :0, queen, and then king test feudal :0, and then kingdom, and then emperor underscore test underscore feudal underscore male, go back to the first three words, copy that, :0, emperor, and then go that underscore female :0, and then the empress, and then the first three words on its own to empire. So that is all of the coding side of things done. Let's upload the mod and test and see if it works. So back in the playsets here, we've got our test government. I'm just going to quickly reload and clear the cache. File size for you should change to the size of the mod that you're working on. If we go to, you could launch the game as is with the on file version in here, but if you want to upload the mod, you have to go to mod library, then click on upload mod, and then go to test government, and that's where you would upload it to Steam. You leave the mod library mod ID empty and add a 10 characters to that, and then click on upload mod. That's how you upload it to Steam. I'm not going to do it for this tutorial. I'm just going to use the on file version, and then we can click play. Once you've launched the game, you can click on new game, click on 867, because that's when we put our current date beforehand at. And then we want to go look at France and then change to government view. And we've got our test government in here. And we've also changed King Lothair II to tribal. And we've also got the Prussians over here. I see I have made an error with the Duke title, so I'll go quickly and change that. So that's all fixed there. We've got Duke now. And yeah, so that is the end of this tutorial. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. Like the video if you like the video. Subscribe if you want to see more tutorials and other content. And let me know if you want any tutorials in the future. Cheers.